Get ready. JustProfessor here. You've been thinking about making a change for months, maybe years. You know staying where you are isn't great, but you can't pull the trigger on something new. Not because the new option is bad, but because you're terrified of one specific feeling: regret. And that fear is trapping you in mediocre choices. Think about the last time you had to make a real decision. Not what to eat for lunch, but something that mattered. Switching jobs, ending a relationship, moving cities, starting a business. Chances are you didn't just weigh the options logically. You imagined how terrible you'd feel if you made the wrong choice. That feeling, that anticipated regret, probably influenced your decision more than any rational analysis. Most people don't choose what's best. They choose what feels safest from future regret. And that's causing them to make worse decisions without realizing it. Regret aversion is the tendency to avoid actions because you're afraid of regretting them later. It's not about the actual consequences of a choice. It's about avoiding the emotional pain of potentially feeling like you made a mistake. Your brain treats future regret as something to avoid at all costs, even when avoiding it means missing out on better options. This happens because regret is one of the most painful emotions humans experience. It's not just disappointment about an outcome. It's the specific pain of knowing you caused a bad outcome through your own choice. You blame yourself. You replay the decision over and over. You think about the alternative you didn't choose and torture yourself with how much better it would have been. Your brain knows how bad regret feels, so it tries to protect you from it. But here's the problem. Your brain is terrible at predicting what will actually make you regret something. It overestimates how much regret you'll feel. It focuses on the wrong types of decisions. And, worst of all, it makes you so afraid of regret that you end up making choices that guarantee you'll have regrets anyway. The way this plays out is simple, but destructive. When you face a decision, your brain doesn't just evaluate the options. It generates vivid scenarios of future regret for each choice. You imagine choosing option A and having it go wrong. You feel the regret in advance. Then you imagine choosing option B and having it go wrong. You feel that regret too. Whichever option makes you imagine more intense regret becomes the option you avoid, regardless of whether it's actually the better choice. Let me show you how this ruins decisions in real life. Career decisions get destroyed by regret aversion. You're in a job that's fine, but not great. You get an opportunity at a different company. Better pay, more interesting work, room to grow, but you don't take it. Why? Because you imagine the new job not working out. You imagine your new boss being terrible. You imagine the company culture being toxic. You imagine regretting the move and wishing you'd stayed where you were. That imagined regret feels so real and so painful that you stay in the mediocre job, even though the new opportunity was objectively better. The twist: staying in the mediocre job will also lead to regret. In 5 years, you'll look back and regret not taking the chance when you had it. But that regret feels distant and abstract right now. The regret of making an active choice and having it fail feels immediate and vivid. So you choose the passive option, not because it's better, but because the regret attached to it feels less scary in the moment. Relationships fall apart because of regret aversion. You're in a relationship that isn't working. You know you should end it, but you don't because you're afraid of regretting it. You imagine breaking up and then realizing they were actually the right person. You imagine being alone and wishing you'd tried harder to make it work. That fear keeps you in a bad relationship for months or years longer than you should stay. Meanwhile, the person who would actually be right for you passes by because you're stuck in the wrong relationship. You'll regret that, too, eventually. But regret aversion doesn't think long-term. It just makes you avoid the active choice that triggers the most vivid regret imagery right now. Investment decisions get sabotaged by regret aversion constantly. You have money to invest. You research options. You find good opportunities. But you don't invest because you imagine the investment losing value and you imagine how much you'd regret losing money. So you keep the money in a savings account earning almost nothing. You think you're being safe, but you're actually guaranteeing a different kind of regret. The regret of missing out on growth because you were too afraid to act. Or the opposite happens. You invest in something safe and boring because you're more afraid of regretting an active, risky choice than regretting a passive, safe choice. You buy index funds when you had the knowledge and opportunity to invest in something with much higher returns. Years later, you regret playing it too safe. But regret aversion made the safe choice feel less regret-inducing at the time of decision. Social situations get awkward because of regret aversion. You want to approach someone interesting at an event. You want to speak up in a meeting. You want to share your opinion in a group conversation. But you don't, because you imagine it going badly. You imagine saying something stupid. You imagine being rejected or ignored. You imagine regretting the attempt, so you stay quiet and miss the opportunity. The cruel irony is that research shows people regret inactions more than actions in the long run. When people look back on their lives, they don't regret the things they tried that didn't work out. They regret the chances they didn't take. They regret staying silent. They regret not making the move. They regret playing it safe. But in the moment of decision, regret aversion makes inaction feel safer because the regret of action feels more vivid and immediate. Major life decisions get paralyzed by regret aversion. Moving to a new city, going back to school, starting a business, having kids, not having kids. These decisions all carry the potential for regret no matter what you choose. So people freeze. They can't decide because every option comes with imagined scenarios of future regret. They wait for a clear sign that one option won't lead to regret. But that sign never comes because every real choice involves uncertainty and risk. This waiting is itself a choice, though. Not deciding is deciding to stay with the status quo, and the status quo also leads to regret eventually. But regret aversion makes active choices feel more regret-inducing than passive inaction. So people stay stuck in analysis paralysis, imagining all the ways they might regret any move they make. Consumer decisions get manipulated through regret aversion. Companies design return policies and money-back guarantees specifically to reduce your fear of regret. They know you're afraid of regretting a purchase, so they promise you can undo it if you regret it later. This makes you more likely to buy, but it also makes you focus on regret as the main factor in your decision rather than whether you actually need or want the product. Limited-time offers exploit regret aversion from the opposite angle. Buy now or regret missing this deal forever. They make you more afraid of regretting inaction than regretting the purchase. You buy things you didn't need because the fear of future regret over missing the deal overpowers your rational evaluation of whether you actually want the thing. So, how do you make decisions without being controlled by regret aversion? How do you choose well when your brain is screaming about all the ways you might regret every option? First, recognize that regret is guaranteed either way. You will experience regret in your life no matter how carefully you decide. Trying to avoid all regret is impossible. The question isn't how to avoid regret. It's which type of regret you'd rather have. Do you want to regret trying something that didn't work out, or regret never trying? Most people, when they think about it this way, would rather regret the action than the inaction. Second, distinguish between anticipated regret and actual regret. The regret you imagine before making a decision is not the same as the regret you'll actually feel after. Your brain exaggerates future regret to protect you from risk, but research shows people adapt to outcomes much better than they expect. Things you think will devastate you with regret often end up being fine or even good in retrospect. Do not let imagined regret that will probably never be as bad as you think control your real decisions now. Third, focus on the decision process instead of the outcome. You can't control outcomes completely. You can control whether you made a thoughtful, well-informed decision. If you gather information, consider your values and goals, and make the best choice you can with what you know at the time, then you have nothing to regret even if the outcome isn't perfect. Regret comes from knowing you made a careless or cowardly choice, not from outcomes that didn't work out despite good decision-making. Fourth, set a deadline for decisions. Regret aversion thrives on indefinite timelines where you can keep avoiding the choice forever. If you set a clear deadline, I will decide by this date, then you force yourself to move past the paralyzing fear of regret and actually make a choice. The deadline doesn't have to be arbitrary. Just set one that gives you enough time to think, but not so much time that you never decide. Fifth, do a regret analysis for both action and inaction. Don't just imagine the regret of doing something. Also, vividly imagine the regret of not doing it. Picture yourself 10 years from now looking back. How would you feel if you didn't take this opportunity? How would you feel if you stayed where you are? When you balance the anticipated regret on both sides instead of only focusing on the regret of action, the decision often becomes clearer. Sixth, remember that action gives you information and options. Even if a choice doesn't work out perfectly, taking action teaches you things and opens new possibilities. Inaction keeps you stuck with no new information and no new options. From a long-term perspective, action almost always leads to better places than paralysis, even when the specific action doesn't work out exactly as hoped. Seventh, talk to people who took the risk you're considering. If you're afraid of regretting a career change, talk to people who made similar changes. You'll find that most of them don't regret it, even when it was hard or didn't turn out exactly as planned. Real stories from real people counteract the exaggerated regret scenarios your brain invents. Regret aversion is making you choose based on fear instead of opportunity. You're not picking the best option. You're picking the option where you can most easily imagine avoiding the feeling of regret. And because your brain imagines regret more vividly for actions than inactions, you end up staying stuck in mediocre situations while better options pass you by. This creates a terrible pattern in life. You avoid career moves because you're afraid of regretting them. You stay in wrong relationships because you're afraid of regretting ending them. You don't start projects because you're afraid of regretting the effort if they fail. You play it safe with money because you're afraid of regretting losses. And all of this avoidance leads to the exact thing you were trying to prevent: a life full of regrets about chances not taken. The research is clear on this. When people look back on their lives, they overwhelmingly regret inactions more than actions. They regret what they didn't do, not what they did. They regret silence, not speaking up. They regret staying, not leaving. They regret the safe choice, not the risky one. But regret aversion makes you do the opposite in the moment. It makes you choose whatever minimizes immediate imagined regret, which usually means choosing inaction and safety. Understanding regret aversion won't make decisions easy. You'll still feel fear about potential regret, but knowing that this fear is biased and exaggerated helps you not let it control you. You can acknowledge the fear and choose anyway. You can recognize that the regret you're imagining is probably worse than any regret you'll actually feel. You can remind yourself that regret from trying is better than regret from never trying. Every meaningful decision involves the possibility of regret. That's not a bug in the decision-making process. It's a feature of having real choices with real stakes. The goal isn't to find a choice with no potential for regret. The goal is to not let fear of regret trap you in bad situations or prevent you from pursuing good opportunities. The next time you're avoiding a decision because you're afraid of regretting it, ask yourself this: what will you regret more in 10 years, trying and having it not work out perfectly, or never trying at all? That question cuts through the distorted thinking that regret aversion creates. It helps you see that the safe choice isn't actually safe from regret. It just moves the regret further into the future where it's harder to imagine right now. Subscribe to learn more about the mental traps making your decisions worse than they need to be.